Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Women Who Rock Investigates, where branding just got even better. Our media source provides case studies in the areas of breaking news reports, health policy and government, human resources, and more. Our handpicked experts provide our audiences with credible information to validate the latest in these studies. Women Who Rock Investigates are heard over most of your radio podcasts, such as Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, and iHeartRadio, just to name a few. We are interested in getting our experts heard around the globe, and we have partnered with Live 365 and Airtime Pro Radio to extend their voices of claims and theories. Join us each Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time after Women Who Rock with Success. Now, let's go to the show.
Good morning and welcome to the show on this morning. This is your host, Ms. Diane Winbush. And so today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about criminal justice inside of the courtrooms. We're going to hit a little bit on the domestic violence and during the COVID-19, the risk of some of that as well. And so we have a criminal defense platform with us today, as always, to be able to help you to understand our theories as well as what we're trying to convey over to our audience. So welcome to the show, criminal defense attorney Maria Barlow, also criminal defense attorney. She's also specified in domestic violence cases, and that is Allie Keegan, as well as professor of justice studies at Berkeley University, and that's attorney Charlene Brown Wyand. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great. So since, Maria, this is your first time, we're going to let you go first, and you can be able to share a little bit about yourself as to what you do in practice with the audience.
Okay, so yes, I'm a private practice attorney. I have my own firm. It's the Barlow Law Firm. We represent criminal clients in criminal cases as well as domestic relations cases, domestic violence cases, and a couple of other areas of law as well. We're located in Chicago, Illinois, and just happy to be on your show. Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, great. You're welcome. Professor Charlene, you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Good morning. Thank you. And hello, everyone. My name is Charlene Brown. I am a professor of law and criminal justice at Berkeley College. We have campuses in New York and New Jersey. In addition, I am also an attorney. And previously, I was a police officer. I'm retired NYPD deputy inspector from the New York City Police Department. I also have a Facebook page called Living While Black, Blue, and Pink, where we share and discuss information and resources circling around police reform.
Oh, wow, great. Okay. And so, of course, Allie, go ahead and you can introduce yourself to the platform.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Allie Keegan. I am a private criminal defense attorney in California. I practice in state and federal courts in San Diego specifically. And we handle every stage of the criminal defense process, from investigations, obviously, throughout the trial process, and then post-conviction relief as well to help people clean up their records. We do everything from DUIs to murder, but we do handle quite a bit of domestic violence and sex offenses and cases of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we're going to start with Maria. A lot of times when it comes to, I take that back. We're gonna go with Professor Wyand, Brown Wyand first. We're gonna start with you, Charlene.
Okay.
So we'll start with you. So a lot of times when it comes to criminal justice, even defendants, they don't even understand a little bit as to what that means. And so, take for instance, I was able to sit on a court watch last week because I think that's kind of important too when you're trying to get information. And so some of the defendants, they were on trial and did not even understand much of a clue as to what was going on. So share with us, with the audience, as to what criminal justice actually consists of. What are the elements of criminal justice, and why do we attach it to the law?
So that's a very good question, and one of the things I really advocate is civic engagement and just having knowledge of our basic government structures. And so the criminal justice is known as a system or sort of an ecosystem, and it's comprised of three parts. And any of my students out there are listening, I call it the 3 C's: the cops, the courts, and the correction systems. And those 3 systems work together to navigate individuals through the court process. The police will arrest the person when there's probable cause and bring them to the courts, and courts make determinations about guilt or innocence in the criminal arena, and depending on the outcome of that, a person may move on to the corrections facility. And corrections has a number of responsibilities, and there's different theories about why corrections exist and how it exists, whether it deals with punishment and rehabilitation and reentry back into society.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because even, with that, sometimes, as I stated before, sometimes individuals, they're kind of a little bit confused as to which is which, why am I here, and what is the purpose. And so we just kind of wanted to clarify that. And so still with you, Professor, how are courts adjudicating cases during the COVID-19? We know that when I went to Court Watch and was able to sit and watch some judges, adjudicate a lot of cases. There were a lot of limitation in the courtroom. It couldn't be packed. So where you are, in your perspective, how are courts adjudicating cases where you are?
So I think that's a good question, especially since we're sort of represented nationally. We have Chicago, California, and New York on the line. So in New York, things are opening a little bit slower than some other places, and as you said, there are restrictions on courts and court hearings to the extent possible. Sometimes a number of hearings might happen utilizing video conference. There's definite limitations on who can be in the courtroom and who can be in the courthouse because everyone is practicing social distancing. So, yes, there's definitely been a dramatic change, and the courts are still adjusting to how they can move cases through their system while we're trying to maintain social distancing and keeping safe.
Absolutely. So, Maria, we're going to move to the next segment, and we're going to talk about exoneration. And a lot of defendants are trying to get approved for this. They're trying to apply for exoneration. Some people may not even be aware that they can be exonerated, depending on whether they are a Class A, B, C, or D felon. So tell us a little bit about that, if you would, Maria, as to what exoneration is and how can defendants apply for it in their area.
So here in Illinois, we actually have a lot of resources for exoneration. We have the Illinois Exoneration Project, which is taken on by, the Illinois Innocence Project, which is taken on by several of the schools located here. And so the only thing they would have to do is go onto one of the respective schools' websites and click apply. And they have a lot of dedicated attorneys as well as law students who are helping defendants that have been wrongly convicted reach exoneration. Also, what they're doing is helping them get compensation for it. A lot of people, once they're exonerated, are entitled to compensation. So we have a very supportive system here. I definitely can't speak for other states, but our system here is extremely supportive of, exoneration. And I think Illinois, if memory serves me correctly, has the highest number of exoneration cases so far.
Okay, great. So we're going to go to Allie, and we want to talk about preparing for trial. And so with that, of course, we're still talking in regards to the COVID-19 era, as well as people are practicing social distancing. Some things are limited to offenders and defendants while they are incarcerated, especially the law library. So what have you seen, or what can you be able to share with us as to how defendants can prepare for their trial during the COVID-19 and while everyone is, I guess, waiting for the lift, because some courtrooms have went back to full capacity as to hearing cases and adjudicating cases, and some have not. So could you share with us a little bit about that?
Right. It's a really great question, especially because even while some courts are finally back to operating at some sort of normal capacity, the reality is pretty much across the country, there's a huge backlog now from when courts came to a screeching halt at the beginning of the pandemic. So even if you're in the queue for your trial, it might be months away before you can even realistically consider it. And one big misconception, I think, among clients and people both in and out of custody that are awaiting their trial is that because they're not going to court right now, there's not much that can be done, and that's just not true. This is actually really the time while you're waiting to double down and get in touch with your lawyer and start doing all of that groundwork on your case and really get ahead of the game. So that means maybe going through your discovery for the 5th or 6th or 7th time, requesting absolutely anything that could be missing from the prosecution so that you can reinforce your own defense in your case and be completely prepared for whenever you do get that trial date. But it also might mean leveraging this current situation, because when we're talking about courts and prosecutors' offices that are completely overburdened and they don't know how to catch up, they might be much more likely to give you deals even if there is a very strong case against you. So whether or not that's beneficial to you and an option you want to explore is ultimately between you and your lawyer. But it is an opportunity to say, hey, maybe this was a really, really strong case against me originally, but I might be able to get a better deal or a better sentence now because the courts just want to get me off the docket and not have to deal with it. So looking into all of those things and really working together with your lawyer could be a huge advantage to you now, while some people aren't even thinking to work their case.
Absolutely, because I experienced that last week with the Court Watch, that platform that I was able to sit on with some other individuals, and so I saw out of 4 courtrooms, I think 50 cases was heard within. I think we went in about 9:15, and I think about 12 o'clock we were out. So it was about 50 cases that was heard, and also they were giving them, releasing them on their own recognizances, and they were also dismissing a lot of cases. And I'm pretty sure that the COVID-19 pandemic was a part of that as well. So thank you for that. So, Professor Brown, what if an individual, and these are some questions that some defendants have given to me for the program on today, what if a defendant have been incarcerated for a long length of time, but they have been freed, and they have been freed for about, say, 10 to 13 years? How would that apply to them if they want to be able to go and get exonerated or apply for exoneration, even if they have been out for a while of incarceration?
Well, the rules in general, since we are speaking to a national audience, varies from case to case and from state to state. And I think it was already mentioned, there are a number of programs that people that were formerly incarcerated or are still incarcerated and are looking for exoneration can work with. Again, there's the Innocence Project in New York, and they work nationwide. And then there's also the Exoneration Project in Chicago. And there's a fairly easy application process that you can search on the internet, and you can readily contact those organizations, and they can work with you to assist you with your case.
Okay. Maria, back to you. There is a huge, I guess, I'm not going to say it's an issue. I guess this is becoming as a pandemic as well, as to where offenders are having issues with prison reform, while the pandemic is going on, and they're having issues with a lot of health crises that are going on behind the bars and what have you. And so they don't, some individuals are offering resources to them, and then there are some things where the individuals are kind of trapped as to they don't know what to do. My loved ones, I just looked on a platform just a minute ago, and this wife is going to get ready to lose her husband due to COVID-19. He already has previous issues going on. And do you see where there may be some malpractice issues for lawsuits that's going to be coming out of some of this? And I know that you all are not malpractice attorneys. I'm aware of that, but I'm just wanting to be able to bring that to the table as well, because families are concerned. They're concerned about no programs, They're concerned about a lot of things that have been limited to them, law library as well, while the COVID is going on. And they're also concerned about they are losing loved ones, and they feel that the correctional institution, as I explained to one of them, is so much the institution can be able to do too. So I would love for you to be able to elaborate on that if you could.
I think it's the problem is, by us being in a pandemic, I think that everybody is taking this a little bit at a time and learning as we go. And that's an unfortunate way to put it, but that is just where we are. And so you do have situations where the corrections institutions aren't able to act as they normally would because of COVID and because of the pandemic. I don't think truly that there will be a lot of lawsuits behind COVID, only because it's not as if it's something that was created by someone that you could tie back to it. Perhaps later, once we learn more about COVID and there's someone to tie some negligence to, there might be some lawsuits, but I doubt it. And the reason I say that, because we have people as high up as the president that has contracted COVID, allegedly. So you have the governor, you have the president's son, you have a lot of high up people that have COVID. And I think that COVID is going to, unfortunately, be treated like an extreme flu or an extreme cold, where there won't be a place where you can sue or get a cause of action. And that's just my opinion. I could be very wrong, but I don't think that COVID is going to be the type of thing where you'll see a lot of suits and people being able to recover from contracting COVID. I think we'll probably see a lot of suits from the vaccinations, if anything.
Okay. If I could add to that, and I totally agree, and where it looks like some of the legal theorists are going is because of the nature of COVID, because it is everywhere, that makes it less likely to pin liability on a person, because you don't know where it is, you don't know how to catch it, you're not quite sure who you caught it from. So because of that, it's very difficult to say, I got this because someone did X to me. And I think that, unfortunately, is going to be the direction, and it's going to be able to allow large institutions like prisons, like hotels, like public venues to be held liable if they can show that they've taken reasonable precautions. And we are sort of in a new space right now where we're looking at the law being developed on something that we didn't expect to deal with, and we're really making it up as we go along, so to speak.
I agree.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I completely agree with both of you that I think saying learning as we go is such a great way of putting it, because everyone is doing that. The one thing I would add, though, is if the government, especially when we're talking about incarcerated, vulnerable populations, if the government's defense might be, well, how are we supposed to know you specifically were going to get hurt if you do have pre-existing conditions? One thing incarcerated people really want to make sure they do is get in touch with their lawyer and say, hey, look, I am of an at-risk age, or I have pre-existing conditions that would make me much more likely to be very severely injured if I do contract COVID, and have the court be made aware of that, so that if you do end up contracting it down the road, and God forbid you have long-term effects as a result, at least then if you do want to maybe throw the Hail Mary and file a federal lawsuit or something against the prisons and the jails, you at least have a record that you told the court, look, I am vulnerable here. I am much more at risk than maybe the other incarcerated people here. And you want to make a record early and often of you raising these concerns with the courts.
Absolutely. Allie, did you want to comment on that?
That was me.
Oh, that was Allie? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, and I would not want to, I'm sorry about that. Or Maria, would you like to comment on that? I'm sorry.
As far as making the record?
Yes, because, I think it's a lot of attorneys. Now, don't get me wrong. I think they're giving a lot of family members a lot of false hope. There's a lot of individuals that have sought out attorneys, and the attorneys are giving them a lot of false hope. Because my thing is, what I try to explain to those that come and ask me questions, I'm not an attorney, but I can be able to give them information off of what I hear from the podcast from you all. And so, I was telling them, I said, now California is doing their due diligence. They're letting them out. Just move on out of here so we don't have to worry about you doing anything to us. But I'm thinking this is something that we were not accustomed to. This is not a daily routine or anything like that. And I feel that there are some individuals that are being taken advantage of and being misled as to, I'm going to be able to win this lawsuit for you because of your husband passing away or your daughter passing away in prison because of this. We have lawsuits everywhere if that's the case.
I agree, and that's why I don't think that can happen. Just like one of the speakers said, that who are you going to tie this to? How can you pinpoint where you got it? There is just not today enough research to be able to pinpoint it to who you got it from. And I don't even think that being in jail is enough to say, okay, I absolutely contracted this from the prison, and I absolutely would not have contracted it if otherwise. Who's to say that your being there, someone in your family didn't have it and mailed you a letter and it was still on that letter and that's how you contracted it? I think that there's just not enough known to be able to tie this to any individual or any individual institution. Now, will attorneys file lawsuits? Sure, because we want to make money. But will we win those lawsuits? Probably not. Probably not. But you know what? Guess what? Again, I could be wrong, and it doesn't hurt to try. I would not be filing one of those lawsuits at this point. I just wouldn't. I just don't think that you're going to be able to tie anybody to it. So, yeah, I don't think that that's probably the best course of action or advertising if that's what attorneys are telling people.
Okay. So this is not on our itinerary, but just kind of plug this in for a minute, and we want to kind of shift to this one before we get to our domestic violence segment, and we want to kind of switch gears to parole, prison reform and parole. And so this is another topic that is very serious for some individuals, family members, for individuals in America in regards to individuals completing programs behind prison bars, and also they're concerned. I think I got something yesterday where, my brother completed all of the programs and things, but when he went to the parole board, he still was denied. He still did not get it. And so someone else made a comment, well, you can go in there and you can sue them. You cannot sue a person for denying you parole. So we want to go back to Professor Brown and Professor Brown Wyans to see if she could be able to address some of that for us, and then the other two attorneys can also be able to comment on it as well as to why individuals, when they feel that when they're going up for parole, they have prison reform, programs, they done graduated, they got their GED, they got all of these things, they got all of these certificates, but they're still denied, and the families feel that they can be able to file a tort claim on the basis of they have applied to all of the rules.
Well, sure. First of all, the one thing that for people to understand, it is a board, so the rules that apply are different from the rules that would apply at court, and so it's the equivalent of filing with an office, with a regular office like the Department of Motor Vehicles or another office. And so the standard then for review is different than the standard that someone would use at court. So although some people are thinking, well, hey, this is the standard that would need to happen in court, it may not meet that standard. And so the decisions and outcomes that people think would happen may not necessarily happen. But it's also important to know that when you're coming back up, to have as much information as possible, to know who's on the parole board, and to know what what is being said and what other evidence is being submitted and suggested to support that. And the resources that it's going to take to challenge a parole board, whether it is your right, may be counterproductive to your case the next time you appeal. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you should not try when you have the right to do so.
Okay, great. Allie, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think it's exactly like what Maria and Charlene had discussed earlier about attorneys needing to be realistic with their clients about their odds and making sure the clients are completely informed of what's actually happening to them. And if a client thinks they can sue the parole board over being denied, there was some sort of failure in communication there probably with their attorney. And one way to get around that on the client's end is to make sure you know at the time of your sentence, when you're still in your trial court, ask your attorney, when will I first be eligible for parole? What are the things the parole board is going to consider? And then if I'm denied, how long will I have to wait before I can be up for consideration again? And to make sure you ask those questions at the beginning of the process so that hopefully you can manage your own expectations and know what you're getting into by the time you're down the road and you're dealing with it.
Maria?
I definitely agree with them. I think the other thing is people have to, I look at it like this. Here's what you've been sentenced to. This is what you've been sentenced to. And so, yes, there might be an opportunity for you to get out early. However, you can't necessarily hang your hat on that. That's what you hope for. And I do agree that you have to have a real conversation with your client. And the client has to also accept that this is what I'm sentenced to and wrap their heads and minds around the fact that they may have to do, the full amount of time that they have been sentenced to. But keeping in mind, I am going to do all things necessary to try to meet what the board requires so that I can get out early. But, yes, there's no guarantee to it. And I don't know what the basis of a lawsuit would be. I mean, I could understand if you were kept longer than you were sentenced to, of course. But the basis of a lawsuit because you didn't get out early, it seems a bit frivolous.
And I feel as kind of like what Allie stated, it's a communication issue, and that's the reason why we're bringing up these topics so they can be conveyed over accordingly, so individuals can perhaps maybe understand and get a grasp as to why certain things are happening, not just because of COVID-19, but because it's the law. We can't just always file a lawsuit for this. And then, too, you sometimes when you mention certain things to individuals, they go, my attorney told me so-and-so, so-and-so. And my thing is your attorney is going to eat up your revenue and your expenses simply because of the fact that he's just, some individuals are just misleading. And so that's the purpose of the podcast, is to share with individuals as to what the criminal defense means. Some individuals, they get arrested, they don't even know what criminal defense is. And so that is the purpose of them learning just a little bit more so they can have all the tools and keys that they need for success. So we're going to move into our last segment of the show, and we're going to be talking about domestic violence. And so we're going to start with Allie because this is one of her key professions as an attorney, and we want you to be able to share what domestic violence is. And sometimes, and the reason why I want you to be able to clarify that because I think I was watching a court show last week, and so this lady had went in there and she had filed the wrong claim against the plaintiff simply because of the fact that she thought that it was really supposed to have been harassment, but she filed it as domestic violence, but the judge still ruled in her favor, and this other judge said, no, that judge was wrong. So if you would share as to some of the techniques of domestic violence, and then we're going to let Maria elaborate on what type of domestic violence should individuals be able to look for. So we're going to go with you first, Allie.
Absolutely. So domestic violence, we kind of discuss it in two different ways. When we talk about domestic violence, maybe here and amongst our friends and family, we might be referring to it one way, which would include that emotional abuse and things like that. And then there's legally maybe a different definition depending on your jurisdiction. But generally speaking, domestic violence is kind of a broad umbrella that can be used to describe many different types of conduct. Obviously, if we're talking about physical abuse, assault, battery, things like that, we know that and we've come to expect that. But it could also involve issues like stalking or harassment, sex offenses depending on the jurisdiction, but spousal rape in California is a thing. You can rape your spouse, and there are some states, unfortunately, that still treat that differently. But we're using a very broad term to describe a bunch of different potential types of conduct. The qualifying relationships is also something some people struggle with. What types of dynamics we're referring to within the domestic violence context would be obviously your spouse, a former spouse, a parent, a co-parent, if you have a child in common with someone, even if it was not someone you had a super long relationship with and you're not together with anymore, that would still qualify, as well as being in a relationship with someone, dating, or cohabiting, basically living together or having formally lived together. And then sometimes in the legal context, we add they'll make it even broader and call it the family protection unit or something, which would include child abuse and neglect. So it's kind of tacking on to the domestic violence a bit.
Okay. So, Maria, do you think that we have seen a spike in domestic violence cases since the COVID-19? Because I know we certainly have seen them with the child abuse issues from, Nancy Grace's Crime Online show. We see it just about every day where children are, dying at the hands of their parents. So what about domestic violence? Is there a spike during the COVID-19 where husbands and wives or significant others are more at home with one another and tension may rise due to the COVID-19?
Absolutely. I think also, just in some of the research I did, I found it to be particularly interesting that there was a spike during actual COVID when we were to shelter in place, but the greater spike actually came after things started to open back up. And I think that they've said that part of why that happened is because when we were sheltered in place, people were home together all day. So the person who was the victim did not necessarily have an outlet to be able to make that call or send that text message because their abuser was there all day in the same house with them. So they weren't able to, for instance, leave and take the children to school and then make that call or send that text, or even go out for shopping. It was so different. So many things were closed that a lot of reports weren't happening. So there were more after we began to open back up a little bit. And I think here in Chicago, we actually had a huge spike of men that were calling in for who were victims of domestic violence. But I think Chicago did an exceptional job to try to help the victims of domestic violence because they actually partner with Uber and Lyft to give people rides to shelters. If you needed to get away from your partner and you were a victim of domestic violence, you could call the hotlines or text the hotlines in order to get the code to use Uber or Lyft to still be able to get away.
Okay. So, and this would be our last question before we conclude the show today. So this is for Professor Wyans. With your studies at the Berkeley University, what are some of the takeaways that you share with your students and with the classroom and with the I guess the law students that you do on a daily basis as far as criminal law, or whether it's prison reform or criminal justice?
Well, one of the key things, and I think I mentioned it last time we spoke, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, is that what it means to be a responsible citizen, whether you're a student of criminal justice or not, you should really understand the machinations of local government, because your local your judge in your area, your community, your member of the parole board, your commissioner of parole board. Those decisions are going to have a greater impact on your day-to-day life than on a national level and a national scale. So it's really, really important to understand how government and criminal justice works on your local level, and for you to have some form of influence on it. The second thing I always impart on many of my students, because many of my students are, as we all are, sometimes frustrated with why things are the way they are in criminal justice. And I tell my students to challenge that frustration and to identify the problem, just like a company would identify a new invention, and to think about ways to engage in that policy and reform and to be a part of the system. Although it's important to have people that are outside that are critics of the system, for people that really want to do the work and meaningfully make a change to have those decisions. There was a few years ago, the New York Times and the Washington Examiner did a report, and they uncovered bias, for example, in parole boards and parole board decisions. So who are these people that are in place to make those decisions? How can you be one of those people to be the change that you want to see? So those are some of the underlying themes that I like to infuse and share with my students, students of criminal justice.
Absolutely, because I feel that, even in that area, first of all, I think that it's very important also, for all of us to be able to get the facts. A lot of times, especially with the recent headlines that we have seen with Rayshard Brooks, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. We have seen a lot of things in that area, and even the assailant that came to one of the protests that was underage. He was 17 years old, and he brought the high-powered weapon with him and was able to fatally wound a couple of individuals. And it doesn't matter about the race; it matters about what are we doing to make our voices to be heard. But the thing that I express the most is get all of the facts. And I have been guilty myself. Sometimes if you see something, the media will they will refrain from broadcasting all of the elements of the story, and they will conceal it in order to get everybody, stirred up. And then later on, law enforcement will bring out the true facts, the district attorney's office and what have you, as to actually what went on. And so, my thing is, that's the reason why we have these case studies with the Women's Show, is to be able to bring facts to the audience so they won't be making assumptions, they won't be concluding their own assumptions without having all the true facts as to what things are and what they really actually represent. So with that being said, we're going to go around the table and for every guest to be able to share how they can be contacted, how the audience can be able to network with them after the show, any publications, any upcoming lectures that you may have. You can be able to share this. Any publications that you have published in the past, you can be able to share this. This way, the audience can be able to get a little bit more in depth about what you do and your brand, and also it can be able to help them to be able to follow you later on after the show. So we're going to start with Allie first, and you can be able to go ahead and share your information with the audience.
Thank you. As everyone knows, my name is Allie Keegan. The office I work out of in San Diego is called the Law Office of David P. Shapiro, and you can contact me by phone at 619-295-3555, by email at Allie, ALLY, at dpshapiro.com, or you can connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Allie Keegan Law. I've done most recently two lectures on bail reform specifically. The first was about the arguments for and against and how to argue for pretrial release for yourself to put yourself in the best position moving forward in your case. And then most recently, a couple weeks ago, specifically as it pertains to COVID and what people want to keep in mind to try to get themselves out of custody while they're awaiting trial. So those are Googleable, and if you have any questions, just feel to reach out. I'm more than happy to connect with anyone.
Great. Maria?
So, hi, I'm Maria Barlow of the Barlow Law Firm. I'm located in Chicago. My website is attorneymariabarlow.com. My phone number is 773-614-7774. I am on social media. I'm on Facebook as Maria Barlow, as well as the Barlow Law Firm, LLC. And on Instagram, I can be found at the Maria Barlow _ the Barlow Law Firm. As far as publications, we are actually updating our website to list all the publications that I have been featured in. There are many, so I'm not going to list them all. And then I also have on my website a small clip of some commentary that I did for the show For My Man. So you all can check that out as well.
Okay, great. Professor Brown?
Yeah, so I can be reached through Berkeley College. My email address is chb@berkeleycollege.edu. I can be reached on Instagram. My IG handle is Legalnista. And please follow me on Facebook, Living While Black, Blue, and Pink. It's the platform that I've established to share information, notes, articles on police issues, police reform, women in policing, and some other lifestyle information. I have been featured as a blogger for the Vera Institute, and I assisted in creating a guidebook to give policy guidance to police officers to engage in better community policing and community engagement. And thank you again for having me.
You are welcome. And, of course, you know you're going to be back on again. It is so very important so we can be able to stay abreast with legalities that are surrounding very hot topics that we face in America. So just to recap, today, ladies and gentlemen, we have had 3 experts to be able to give you information, give you tools, give you resources, and to clarify some things in criminal defense, criminal law, also in domestic violence. We also went over some things in regards to parole hearing and how they justify things, and then we have also went over some very key points as to we cannot always see a lawsuit as a money ticket. We have to learn how to get the resources that we need, and some things are just like they say in the court system, it's an act of God. And so we cannot always find solutions so we can be able to find ways to file tort claims. So we have to get the knowledge first. We get the answers. We get the tools, and we get the resources. So thank you, ladies, for being our guests on today on Women Who Rock Investigates. And thank you for being a future guest because, of course, I'm going to be calling on you all later on as well. So thanks again, and you all have a great day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.